Hello, my friends. We are continuing our series on the Mass, and in fact, today we're here in the sacristy, and I wanted to talk about a liturgical action that is very closely related to the Mass, but is not part of the Mass, and that's Eucharistic exposition and adoration. We have exposition and adoration of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament during the week, usually on Wednesdays when the schedule is normalized. And then other times during the month, for example, Joyful Noise, and maybe you've seen Eucharistic Adoration at other parishes or on TV. So the idea of Eucharistic Adoration is, in the Mass, we receive Jesus in the Eucharist, but if you think about it, you don't often get to spend a lot of time just looking at Jesus in silence, which is called an act of adoration. And so if we believe that Jesus really is present in the Eucharist, the church said, what if we bring him out of the tabernacle and put him in a place in silence where people can just sit and look at him, as so many people did during Jesus' life. And so Jesus is exposed, right? He's brought out of the tabernacle. He's placed in a place where people can look at him and gaze upon him and adore him. That's where Eucharistic adoration comes from. And then it's a time of silence and prayer. And because that's such a powerful time of prayer, the church has special liturgical vestments and vessels that help kind of call us to the majesty and the glory of what we are celebrating. So, Jesus is in the Eucharist, and the priest will go to the tabernacle at adoration. He will place Jesus in this vessel, which is called a monstrance. The monstrance, you'll see, is very ornate. And the monstrance comes from the Latin word monstrare, to show. And so Jesus would, there's a little door in the back. Jesus would be inserted into the little holder, and then the door would be closed, and it would sit on the altar. So here, enthralled to this beautiful monstrance, Jesus is being demonstrated. And it's made of precious metals and gems, because Jesus is the King of Kings. And so the majesty of the vessel that holds him bespeaks the person who is being held. Right? So Jesus will sit enthroned on a throne of gold, as he will in heaven, but we sit him on a throne in the monstrance on the altar. The monstrance is then placed on top of this, on the altar, on top of this gold vessel, which is called a tabor. So the priest would put the monstrance up here. I'm not going to leave it up there so you can see me. So this is called tabor, and this comes from the scriptures, where Jesus took the apostles up Mount Tabor and was glorified. We call it the transfiguration, right? He was seen in all of his glory, resurrected glory. And so the church calls this vessel that raises the monstrance up so people can look and see him, kind of like the mountain raised Jesus up and they could see him in his resurrected glory. So this is called a tabor, where the monstrance and Jesus in the monstrance sits so people can adore. During the actual celebration of the adoration, but also sometimes during Mass, people notice that we use incense. Incense is an ancient symbol. It comes from the Old Testament. It had a twofold purpose. Incense was supposed to be fragrant spice, a fragrant spice that was burned and gave a good smell. So in the Old Testament, incense was burned in the Holy of Holies, the most sacred place where God's presence was. And it was meant to be very, very smoky, because you aren't able to look upon God in all of his glory, because there's too much. So the smoke would mask God's glory, so we would be able to be in his presence. And it bespeaks, when there's a lot of smoke in a place, it bespeaks the mystery of God. That while we can approach him, because he is so great, we must adore him. So the incense kind of bespeaks that mystery and the divinity of God. But also the symbolism is smoke goes up. And it's supposed to be a reminder that the prayers that we offer, like the incense, poured out, and the smoke rises up to heaven. So the incense has that twofold purpose. So during adoration, and even during the Mass sometimes, the priest will use incense in order to remind us of the great mystery of God's divinity, like in the Old Testament, and then in Jesus. We worship him because he is God, but also the symbolism of as the smoke rises, so too our prayers. The incenser, this is called a thurible. So, and inside it, coals will burn. And it hangs here so that it can smoke and not burn the person that's holding it. And then where the actual incense, the spices are kept, is called the boat, right? The thing that holds it. Also during adoration, the priest, because it's not Mass, doesn't wear the usual vestments of the Mass, primarily the chasuble, right? The outer garment that's worn for Mass. But instead the priest wears a different outer garment that is supposed to be, again, a symbol of charity, being put over. But it's also a garment that allows the priest to be able to use his arms in order to hold the monstrance. So this is called a cope. It's just the word cape, but instead of an A, it's an O, a cope. So it is basically the word for a cape, a kappa in Italian. Again, meant to be a symbol of it. It allows the priest to use his arms, but it's also the sign of Christ being over the authority, which is a stole. And then the very last vestment that we would use, and I can't put it on, but there's a vestment that would go over that's called the humeral veil. The humeral veil. You'll see the priest wearing that vestment as he's grabbing the monstrance in order to give the final blessing or the benediction. And the reason why the priest wears this vestment, the humeral veil, is because, well, number one, it's called humeral because it covers your humerus, right? It covers your arms. So you don't see the priest's hands, and you don't see his arms. And it's not because the priest is unworthy to touch the monstrance, which is true, but that's not the primary reason. The reason the priest wears the humeral veil is at the end of adoration, unlike at the end of Mass or really any other time in the priest's ministry, is usually the priest is giving a blessing, right? I bless you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. But during adoration, Jesus is truly present in the Blessed Sacrament. It is not the priest who is offering the blessing, but God himself in the Eucharist. And so the priest covers over his arms and my hands and will grab the monstrance and form the sign of the cross with the monstrance. But the people are supposed to see it's not the priest who is doing this because my hands are covered and I'm not saying anything. It is God himself who is offering the blessing, which is one of the most profound moments of Eucharistic adoration, is that benediction. Jesus himself offering you a blessing who have come to spend time with him. So these are all the different vestments and vessels that are used during that privileged time of prayer, Eucharistic adoration. And hopefully you do participate in that form of prayer somehow, whether it's you're watching it on TV or live streamed, or maybe you're in person or visiting a church, but you'll kind of understand what it is that's going on and have that time to enter in and pray before our King, Jesus Christ, in the Eucharist. Thank you.